Whatever phase is said to be coming, Lord, I judge it, I run it down in the name of Jesus. I lock out every demon of COVID-19. I lock out any vaccine that is not of you. If there be any vaccine that is of the devil, meant to infuse 666 in the lives of people, meant to corrupt their DNA, any such vaccine, Lord God Almighty, may it be destroyed by fire in the name of Jesus. Any legalizing agent, Lord, for wickedness in this nation, for wickedness in Africa and across the nations of the world, Lord God Almighty, send your angels, send even your angel of the media, send all the angel of fire.
All right. There it is, the Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng. That was last week, Thursday. And I understand it was in Tembisa where he made these comments. Well, let me introduce my panel now. And I have Dr. Aslam Dasoo, and he speaks to us from Johannesburg. I have journalist Pontsho Pilane. She's a journalist who is in Johannesburg. And I also have Mbekezeli Benjamin, who is a researcher at organization Judges Matter. Let me thank you all for making the time to speak to us this morning. Pontsho, I want to start with you. You wrote a very hard-hitting piece at the weekend, and it was on the City Press newspaper, where the caption of the article is "The Real Danger of Mogoeng Mogoeng, the head of the judiciary's Christian fanaticism has far-reaching consequences for South Africa." Let me start with that very headline. Why did you choose such strong words?
Clearly, when we think about the past few years and the Chief Justice and how he's become more emboldened in his Christianity, in his role as the Chief Justice, we should be scared. We're living in a time where we are now recovering from 4 years of a Trump presidency in the US, right? Where a lot of money that was funding sexual reproductive health, HIV services on the continent and in South Africa in particular was taken away because of Christian right-wing fundamentalists who espouse or who believe in the same things or have the same attitudes towards their religious beliefs or responsibilities, the same way that our Chief Justice has. And that is the real danger when we see these lines being blurred by somebody who occupies such a very pivotal and important role in the functioning of our democracy. So for me, it shows, and because of my own experiences within having been in churches that have the same school of thought as Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng, I think it's quite scary to see him become so emboldened and him become even, the press conference he had after the prayer in Tembisa be so unashamed and not back down about his beliefs. We should be scared. We are a circular state, and we should be scared what it means if we blur the lines, or if the Chief Justice blurs the lines for us in his role. What does that mean for the right to abortion, the right to healthcare, the right to contraceptives, every other right that can be there that could be considered morally wrong in the Christian sense?
Yeah. Dr. Dasoo, I want to come to you next, but before I do that, Pontsho has already prompted the Chief Justice, who defended himself, I think it was a day later, where he was addressing the media. Let's just listen for a sec about what the Chief Justice had to say on the back of that speech he gave in Tembisa.
So I'm crying unto God. Whether you call it politics or not, it's neither here nor there for me. And I won't stop doing it. I'm crying unto God. If there is any vaccine, I don't want it. I'm crying unto God for, this is the end time according to we Christians. So if there is any vaccine with 666, I want God to destroy it. If there is any vaccine meant to corrupt the DNA of people, I'm asking God to interrupt with it. Any clean vaccine, they must produce it quickly. People need that for their own health. So if anybody is going, don't pray against 666. Don't pray against Satan. Don't pray against corruption of the DNA. They can criticize until. I'm not worried about that.
Dr. Dasoo, I want to preface this question with exactly what you wrote as well at the weekend, saying for the Chief Justice of a secular state to actively militate against vaccination out of a religious dogma that skirts the boundaries of reason is a resounding abuse of office. When you hear the Chief Justice defending himself there, do you still stand by what you have written?
Good morning, and good morning to my fellow panelists. Of course I do. It couldn't be more plain in that excerpt you played that there is a resounding abuse of his office by his behavior here. It's very clear to me that this is not an issue of rights, religious or otherwise. Those rights apply to everyone under the Constitution, including the Chief Justice. He is completely entitled to his beliefs, his views, and his thoughts. But he holds one of the three pinnacle offices of the government. And in that position, this is more an issue of professionalism and ethics, something I'm fairly well versed in. And for him to expound pretty ignorant theories around vaccines plays into a very dangerous narrative that is emerging and that is growing stronger around the world. I think Pontsho mentioned the Trump presidency having given huge impetus to such a thing. When we know, and I'm a firm believer in science and rationality, and when we know that the scientific method has proved that vaccines are the biggest medical intervention, most major healthcare intervention over the last 100 years, resulting in humanity's great advance in longevity and freedom from disease, then to say that we should be wary of vaccines and in a pandemic of biblical proportions, as the term I used in my article, is simply irresponsible. There is no compulsion to be vaccinated. That is clear. People have a right not to be vaccinated. And in expressing that right, they confer upon them the rights that are given to them in the Constitution. We need vaccines to get the population to a level of herd immunity that suppresses the virus sufficiently. And if people are to follow the Chief Justice's words now, the amount of people who will be doubtful and who will refuse to take the vaccines may impact on us reaching that threshold. So rights are there and we accept, but they have their limits. And we also accept those.
Benjamin, Mr. Mbekezeli, Benjamin, let me come to you. Your organization, Judges Matter, it looks at, I suspect, the behavior of judges or the conduct of judges. And you're going to tell us more about what it is that you do exactly. But I want to ask this question of you, which is something that was said by Pontsho, who is one of our panelists here. She says, I believe it has been by chance and not by design that the Chief Justice's faith has not influenced his decisions on the bench. Answer that question for me.
Well, good morning, Xoli, and good morning to the newsroom viewers and my fellow panelists. Well, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly the places where Chief Justice Mogoeng's religion has influenced his decision making. We, for example, sitting where we're sitting, many of his decisions have been legally sound, and so difficult to go beyond that at the moment. We haven't seen any case that jumps out. But Dr. Dasoo made an important point about that this question of the Chief Justice's comment is not necessarily about his comment or his beliefs or his opinions, but it's about professions and ethics. And we believe that it's actually he undermines judicial ethics by making such strong, open comments, which in fact undermining the standing of the judiciary. Because at the press conference that he held on the day after he made the comment, that press conference was meant to be the day on which the judiciary accounts to the public. The judiciary was supposed to submit its report for public scrutiny, report on court performance, on the way in which the judiciary has operated over the past year. But the bulk of that conversation was taken up by this conversation about the Chief Justice's comments. And so, in a way, he's undermining his very role as the head of the judiciary. And Dr. Dasoo is quite right to say it is an abuse of his office, because in that way, in making such outlandish comments, it does undermine the standing and the reputation of the judiciary. He's the head of the judiciary, the face of the judiciary, and so we think it is a breach of judicial ethics. The code of conduct actually prohibits judges from being from making public comments which would tend to undermine the standing of the judiciary. And so that's where our concern lies. We monitor how the judiciary works. We monitor how judges behave themselves. And in this respect, Chief Justice Mogoeng has fallen below the expectations that we and the law hold of him.
All right. When we return, I'm going to throw this back to the person who actually wrote these comments, that it's by chance that the Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng has not had his decisions on the bench influenced by his religious beliefs. But that after the break. You're watching Newsfeed, the AM edition. Good morning to you if you're just joining us, and I am in conversation with my panelists around the comments that were made by the Chief Justice, who came out very strongly to say he stands by what he said. Pontsho, I want to come to you next, and on the same line of question that I posed to Mr. Benjamin, where you essentially say that the Chief Justice's decisions are influenced by his fanaticism in subtle ways, but they also happen to align with the Constitution. And there are two key words you use, and you say, for now. Again, these are very strong views. Mr. Benjamin has said that so far he cannot point to anything that could easily come out screaming to say, you see, this decision may have been influenced by the Chief Justice's religious beliefs. So are you not being harsh on the Chief Justice?
I don't think I am, Xoli, and this is because I'm speaking from a place of saying that it's coincidence. I'm not saying that he is not a sound judge and he hasn't made sound decisions on the bench. What I'm saying is that in many examples that are stated in the article around how by a lot of times with Christian, very Christian fundamentalists or fanaticists, is that they can do good things, but the harm that is being done as collateral damage while they're doing the good things is what we should be more afraid of. And that's what I'm trying to sound the alarm for, to be like, yes, he's okay for now, right? Are we sure with his growing emboldened nature around declaring his Christian values, what does that mean for abortion rights in South Africa? I also go in to give an example of the African Christian Democratic Party, the ACDP, who also espoused the same beliefs as our Chief Justice. And just 2-3 years ago, they were trying to fundamentally change the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act, right? To say that in order for a person to get an abortion in South Africa, they must first have a scan. And that is a tactic that is being used in the US and in other parts of the world. Just a couple of weeks ago, Poland was up in arms as the fundamentalist Christian right-wing political party was trying to strengthen or make it harder, restrict abortion even more. And these are the small ways in which this can come back and be detrimental to South Africa. What does it mean for us as a secular state, as a liberal state, as a state that has the policies for sexual reproductive health, for HIV care, for health in general? Particularly, we have one of the most liberal acts for abortion. What does it mean when we have then somebody who holds such a influential role in the judicial system, when they are okay with, not just they believe in it, but they're okay with expressing it in their capacity as Chief Justice? And this is where my concerns are coming from. While, I think it's very valid that we do talk about even just around what we're talking about when Dr. Dasoo talks about him being so influential enough to influence whether people get vaccinated or not. So it's not just about his beliefs and what he believes in. It's about his responsibility to the rest of South Africa.
Dr. Dasoo, this is where you come in, because you say that the Chief Justice enjoys a constitutional status equivalent to that of a head of state. And I guess that goes hand in hand with the influence then that he wields in society. What are people to think, or are we actually taking South Africans for granted and saying that they are unable to think for themselves if they are going to be influenced about whether or not they think a vaccine is important for them?
Yes, and I just want to echo what Ms. Pilane said at the end. I mean, it's very clear that a person who speaks from the position of that office, and let's just be specific, he is always the Chief Justice when he is in public. And it is an office of very high standing. He is also a well-known figure. Now, we know what denialism does. In the last pandemic, the AIDS pandemic, we saw the damage that denialism did. And we've been there before. And as a physician and as an adherent to the scientific method, I cannot, for a moment, countenance a view that takes us down that road during this pandemic. We just cannot afford it. By him expounding these views, you can be certain that there have been many people who have heard what he said who will now make the decision not to be vaccinated. And this is not because they are stupid or unthinking. Far from it. They look to him for leadership. And he has now demonstrated where he wants to lead them. And that is down a road to harm. It is an incitement to harm, to persuade people not to take a vaccine, and it is their right not to, but when that right reaches its limit, when the rights of others are impacted, having a situation where we don't reach a threshold for herd immunity means the infections continue and other people get sick and die as a result. So from his position, he should be clear that when he is in public, that he avoids, despite whatever he may believe, he avoids a situation that influences people in a way that causes harm. So lastly, let me just say, for him to retreat into a defense of his rights to speak out demonstrates a lack of awareness of his own position. This is extremely disturbing. And Pilane has gone into several reasons how we have been possibly very fortunate that these views haven't redounded into something serious in the law so far and on the rights of people. He is always, as I said, the Chief Justice when he is in public. He is with us for the next 10 months at least. He should be very careful that during this period, when vaccines are going to become the biggest issue in the world, that he doesn't add to the denialist fringe against vaccination.
Mr. Benjamin, let's come back and bring this to your side. The examples here being used are those of AIDS denialism, and we know the history of what that's done to the country. But I think the more stronger words from Dr. Dasoo is that this is incitement to harm. Is this a slippery road for the Chief Justice where he might see himself being pursued legally? And your thoughts around this? This is quite alarming.
There's actually been a recent decision from the Constitutional Court in which Chief Justice Mogoeng said, and it dealt with the crime of incitement. From that judgment, it's not clear whether he can be held accountable for the crime of incitement. However, there are avenues, legal avenues that can be pursued against him. In fact, there is a complaint that was filed by an organization, I think it's called Africa for Palestine, where they raise issue with these comments that he has made and that they breach the judicial code of conduct. And Dr. Dasoo, I echo his points 100% when he says that the Chief Justice is the Chief Justice in every waking moment of the day. There isn't a time in which he is not the Chief Justice of South Africa. And that position comes with immense responsibility. He has to be responsible in the comments that he makes. And earlier I mentioned the question of judicial ethics, that judicial ethics prohibit him actually from making certain comments. This is something that he subscribes to when he took on the position. And so it can't be that he now says that he has a right to free speech like you and me. We are private citizens. We are not in the office that he holds. He is the Chief Justice of South Africa, and he should be providing leadership responsibly to all South Africans. And then just another small point on whether or not his position as Chief Justice is likely to influence how other judges may behave. The likelihood of that is, of course, present, but I don't think it is strong enough, because each judge has judicial independence, and independence not only from politicians or big companies or the media, but also independence from other judges. Judge should be able to take a decision in a legal and be able to defend without citing reference to some or other judge who has made publicly on a particular law. So that's where the line is drawn.
Yeah. Pontsho, final word from you. Ordinary South Africans, when they listen to someone like the Chief Justice espousing these views around a vaccine, we know COVID-19, there's a resurgence now. People have a right to either say yes or no. There is a constitutionally enshrined right to bodily integrity. Can we not trust that people will make the right choices for themselves?
I think we can trust that people will make the right decisions for themselves. But it is important to also note that when you hold an influential position as the Chief Justice, the decisions that you make are not those that you make for yourself alone. And the influence that you wield is not one that will contribute to it's one that will contribute to other people's well-being as well. So for instance, perhaps I'll give just an anecdote of an example I've heard many times when I've reported on access to abortion and people being denied the access to abortion. A nurse might have listened to the Chief Justice and in her being emboldened in her own religious beliefs that say abortion is wrong. And the next time a person comes to the clinic wanting an abortion, they exercise that right, preventing someone from getting a health service. That is the cost. It's not necessarily about what you want to do with your body or what you want to believe and what you can do to protect yourself, but it is what it does for everyone else. And those particularly, like I said in my article, those who live in the fringes of society, those who are marginalized, and those that depend on influential people like our Chief Justice to hold themselves in high regard enough to make sure that their rights are protected when they are not in the driving seat of those rights being protected.
Yeah, Dr. Dasoo, final word from your side as medical scientists. Does this make your work a little harder in terms of encouraging people to look after themselves once the vaccines are rolled out, when they get to South Africa, whenever that will be? And perhaps also, what's the responsibility, or does this also then complicates the work of government in trying to communicate clear messaging around COVID-19?
Yes, first on the health workforce, you are all aware that health workers risk their lives on a daily basis during this pandemic in treating people who are sick with it. We've had the deaths of many. These deaths will increase if more people get infected, get sick. And as long as we are able to contain the outbreak now until we reach the stage where we can roll out vaccines, this is the risk they face every day. So it is disturbing when the Chief Justice is the person denigrating the only possible instrument that we have to bring this pandemic under control. And secondly, the issue around faith. Of course, there is a freedom of belief enshrined in our Constitution. We have had Chief Justices of the Muslim faith, of the Jewish faith, and of the Christian faith. But this is the first Chief Justice who carries his beliefs on his sleeve. And it's a remarkable thing that he does so. The president was absolutely clear about in his last address, unlike the whole year of very questionable lockdown methodologies. Day before yesterday, he was crystal clear about what it's going to take to get us to the other side of this pandemic. And he was earnest in his appeal for people to adhere to the personal protective measures that they must take, and that they are working very hard to get enough vaccines into the country to vaccinate sufficient numbers of the population. When a major part of the government, the head of the judiciary, militates against vaccines, what does that do? People get confused. The government must be at sixes and sevens over this. The Department of Health, I'm sure, are shaking their heads in wonder, saying, now what do we do when people are going to refuse? How many vaccines can we administer? Will we reach herd immunity? These are very, very serious matters. And I would call on the Chief Justice to reflect and to allow the country to reach a position where we can overcome this pandemic. His office is bigger than him. He is a temporary incumbent. He should safeguard the virtues of that office.
Let me thank you to all of you for coming through and availing yourselves for this discussion. Dr. Aslam Dasoo, thank you very much for your time. Pontsho Pilane, journalist, thank you very much for your time. And Mbekezeli Benjamin from Judges Matter, thanks indeed for your time.